Welcome to the podcast of School Beyond Limitations. In this podcast, you will learn how to guide your child through their school life with the intention to help them find their unique essence that will allow your daughter, your son to live a fulfilled and meaningful life. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity to talk to a professional who is working with school leaders, teachers, families and parents as well, and students. And it's all around, neuroscience, I think, and how, the physical body also reacts to what comes your way. And we thought we will be talking about parenting today and parenting in today's reality with a guest. And her name is Lisa Riegel, who is a writer also of various books, and she lives in the States. And I would like to welcome Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And I would like you maybe to give a little bit of a more detailed introduction to your work and to who you are and where it all started that you ended up working in this field.
Sure. So I was a teacher for 9 years, and then I was an administrator for a couple years. And then I had the opportunity to do my doctoral work at Ohio State. So I studied leadership, and I was really more interested in the human system as opposed to policy. And so I learned a lot about social science research like motivation and engagement and cognitive development. And so I started doing consulting, working. Really, my heart is with the at-risk student and the at-risk family, and figuring out how do we help close some of those equity gaps and help make them happier and healthier. So about 5 years ago, I started really getting into the brain science and thinking, our biology and the context is really what shapes our behavior. So behavior is that intersection between biology and context. And I felt like if we understood the biology better of what's really going on in the brain of two key things, one, how we perceive our reality, and then secondly, how that stress regulation system works and what impacts it has on our executive functioning and our emotional regulation, that could really help schools to redefine some of the problems they're seeing and help parents understand their students better at home. I am a parent as well. My kids are 20 and 23, so I'm over the hump of the tumultuous teenage years. But understanding how their brains worked helped me to parent them differently and help them become healthier and happier.
I think this is an amazing way to enter into this topic because understanding how the brain of a teenager works is something that I think we need to be all aware of. So how would you describe that? How would you explain that?
So the first thing is to think about how we form perceptions. So our brain, in 80% of the traffic in our brain is below our nose. So it's in the unconscious limbic system of our brain. And that part of our brain is really evolved to just keep us alive. It looks for places where we're in danger. It gets our stress regulation system going. It monitors all of our, internal organs, making sure that it's okay. So there's a lot of thinking going on in that brain that we up here, where we actually have consciousness, don't really understand is going on. So we actually get messages from our limbic brain long after it's been processing what's going on around us. So perceptions are formed if you think of a banana, and a banana represents reality, and then within our limbic brain there's a whole bunch of filters, or almost like a spaghetti strainer, and they have little holes in them, and the reality, the information that our brain takes in from our environment goes through these filters. So just like if I took a banana and jammed it through a spaghetti strainer, it doesn't look like a banana anymore. It's different. And so every single human has different configurations of filters. And so we can all be sitting at the exact same event and have very different experiences. And our first emotional response to wherever we are is completely unconscious. So like if you're ever trying to sell your house, your realtor might say, burn a candle that smells like cookies. That's because when we go in, our thalamus is taking in all that sensory data from our environment and it's making sensory associations. So most of us have positive associations with the smell of baking cookies. So if I walk into a home I'm thinking about buying and I smell cookies, my body relaxes. I'm not consciously saying, oh, this house smells like cookies. That reminds me of my grandma. I want to buy this house. It's all happening unconsciously. So when we look at our kids today, they have a whole bunch of filters that are in place based on their context, and they're not positive. And I talk about in my book Neuro, well, I talk about media in general. I grew up watching Little House on the Prairie and Saved by the Bell and, shows that were about family and owning your mistakes and doing good things for the community. And that creates a worldview that becomes one of those filters. So my worldview is that people are generally kind and we help each other out. When you look at the media today that kids consume, it's like, you and I are going to get together and manipulate her so we can vote her off the island. It's all about othering and backstabbing and power. And that's the worldview that kids' brains are registering. And so in their folders, it's people are not kind, people are out to get me. And I'm not blaming media for all of the causes for kids struggling today, but it's one massive factor. Then you have social media, which everybody knows is not good for your brain. But the other thing about social media that I think people don't think about is that when you create a social media profile, you make yourself better than who you actually are. You don't go to the grocery store with a messy bun on a Sunday unshowered and put that picture up on your profile, right? You curate your image. When kids then have to go into real brick and mortar places, they are walking in already knowing they're walking in as a substandard of what they've projected to the world. And from a biological standpoint, that levels your stress level up. The other thing with social media is that it runs on, I mean, the gasoline of social media is dopamine. So every time you get a like, you get a little hit of dopamine and it makes you feel good and it gives you a little energy and it keeps you on the system. I can do something. I can change my profile picture or, put a ribbon for cancer on or do something where I didn't have to do anything. I just virtue signal something and I get 4,000 little hits of happiness from it. If I'm in a real space and you fall down and drop your books and I help you up and you say thank you, I get one. So social media is destroying the value of altruism because we can't compete in the real world setting. And so you see kids that prefer to have an online presence and not be engaging in the world around them because they get more dopamine that way. They get more hits and it's a lower risk, higher reward scenario. So
This is,
yeah,
if I may come in here, because this is
sure.
a very important, remark that you just made, that children, teenagers, they lose kind of the sense of altruism because they are so extremely focused on themselves and on how they are viewed by the outside world. So they make themselves basically dependent on the reactions that they get, right? So
Right.
basically, instead of becoming independent thinkers, they become actually dependent on what other people say about them. And that is exactly the opposite of what the human nature actually is meant to be. Human
Yep.
nature is meant to be a creator, and somebody who creates their own lives in the context of a community. So by knowing, because this is something that we also very much take to heart, the fact that we need to be very mindful as educators, and we work very closely with our parents around, the impact of artificial intelligence. We just had a parent meeting yesterday about the impact of social media and the devices and the constant exposure to it. But this is reality. So what would be your strategy that you would actually suggest to parents to integrate, embody, so that they can help their children navigate this reality that takes them basically away from what we are meant to be, to actually be a human being within a context?
Sure. Well, one thing I would say is that making an effort to talk to your children in a screen-free zone. So having dinner, having conversations at dinner. And, when I was a kid growing up, we had family dinners and they were boring. You're a kid, you want to go do stuff, but you didn't get up and leave when it wasn't about you. You had conversations and you listened to your parents and you learned the rhythm of conversation. You learned when people's nonverbal signals were telling you they were interested or not interested. Today's world, everybody just sits around the table on their phone or they just eat and get up. So I would say if parents can create an intentional space where their kids, where they have conversations about everyday events, that is really, really powerful. And the other piece too is one of the things I used to do with my kids all the time is I would tell them at dinner they had to report two good things that happened today. And this is really important. It kind of goes back to how our brain perceives things. If you have somebody who has a negative set of filters in their brain and somebody else who has positive, say they're identical twins, you say, "How was your day?" The one twin will say, "It was horrible. I woke up late. I had to speed to get here. I had to park way far away. I got here. I spilled my coffee. I ruined my shirt. I was late to my meeting. It was a terrible day." The same exact event for the positive twin, they would say, "Oh, well, it was a little rough in the morning. I was running late and I had to park way out back, but you know what? I got some steps in and then I got into the place and spilled my coffee, but this really nice person helped me clean myself up and my friend let me borrow a sweatshirt because I ruined my shirt and my colleagues were super nice that I was late to a meeting." So exact same event. So that positivity and making intentional, purposeful exercises for your kids to see that is important. When I first started doing this, something that simple, just tell me two good things, my kids couldn't do it. And they would say, "Well, nothing happened." And I would say, "Well, what do you mean nothing happened?" "I don't know. I didn't get in a fight." And I'm like, "That's not good. That's the absence of bad." So, like, what good happened? But they had to prime that thalamus in their brain to look for the good things that were going on in their environment because their brain is so wired to only look for the bad. And so that's a really powerful, simple thing is just to ask your kids, tell me one good thing, two good things that happened today. You can also ask them, tell me one thing you're proud of, because in order to be proud of something, you have to do something worth being proud of. And so you start to build some of this positivity into the context.
I still have something else to ask here because there is also sometimes a behavior that's so established within a person that they are very very reluctant of seeing things differently, and then of course what does it take to help these people to open up towards a new mindset, because basically what you are talking about is changing the mindset, right? So
Mhm.
what would you suggest and advise parents to do if they see that these strategies, I mean, it's a wonderful strategy to be grateful for something during the day, a highlight that one experience, but if you are not there emotionally, maybe it's just a ticking off of an exercise. So what would you say to parents if it doesn't work straight away, because it may not work straight away, and we know it's not working straight away. We also within school sometimes we have to deal with certain situations where it takes maybe months and years to switch this kind of looking at reality from an angle everything is bad. But what if we looked from an angle of, okay, interesting, what else is possible, So what would you say to parents when they face such moments where they see, okay, I tried this strategy and it doesn't work, and still my son or my daughter is constantly, in a negative loop. And again, I don't want to judge negative loop, because negativity and positivity are two opposites that are part of being a human being. Yeah, how would you approach this, Lisa?
So one thing I always say is that the self-awareness is critical. If we're not self-aware, we can't self-regulate or be in self-control. So I do an exercise where I list various stressors like running late or loud spaces, or somebody tells me I did something wrong or whatever. So I list those different things and then I have kids rate, how stressed does this make you? And then we have conversations about what is the real fear underneath this? Because I think a lot of times when kids get into that negative swirl, there's some recurring themes, whether it's I feel left out or I feel dumb or I feel unlovable or, whatever that underlying fear is, helping your kids to understand what that is. Because once we have that self-awareness, then we can start, I said 80% of the traffic's in the lower part. If we're self-aware of what kind of traffic is swirling down there, now we can start to actually lead our brain and we can say, okay, this is not that. So I'll give you an example. Um, I hate being late and I get dysregulated, my body, I get stressed when I'm late. I know where this comes from because when I was a child, my parents were divorced and my dad was always late. And so I spent a lot of time sitting on the front porch waiting for him to pick me up on his visit days. And my little 8-year-old brain at the time associated time with love and worth and those things and negative emotions because I felt left out. So when I'm running late, it's not about time. It's about my brain is making that association. So now that I understand that, I'm able, if I start to run late, I'm able to direct conversation to my limbic brain to say, hey guys, this is not that. We're okay. This is fine. There's no reason to be stressed out about that. And it gives me more control to regulate my emotional state. So kids first have to understand what it is that is the underlying fear. And they may or may not know why they have it. I mean, sometimes we don't know, and that's okay. It's just a matter of knowing that. Then you can start to be more proactive. And, for me being late, I leave early because it's not worth it to me to run late and have to fight that battle within me to fight down stress. So I'm always a little bit early, so I can be proactive. So I think that's one thing that is really important because kids feel out of control. And anxiety is the product of not knowing. If we don't know ourselves, we don't know necessarily how we're going to react. We just feel like we're nervous about that. Then we're always in a stress state. Um, the
And
second
basically,
thing,
what you are saying is that you correlated this experience of yours of lack of being seen, right? So you
yeah,
haven't been seen as a child, and that had an important impact on your
yeah,
grow up upbringing, right? So, and also as an adult person. So that takes me back to what you were saying before, because I think that was a very interesting example that you made, when in the older days, it was just normal that children were seated around a table with adults and they were either included in the conversation or they were expected, so to speak, to be
yeah,
there and to actually observe what is going on in this reality, right? And that helped them also shape their own behavior and their understanding of being part of a bigger picture, of not being alone, even if it's sometimes boring. It can be boring. So what would you say in today's reality, because that was our initial thought? How is parenting in today's reality? Would you say this is an example that we could bring into our today's reality again as a treasure to work with? Yeah, how would you see that?
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think that when kids have opportunities, even if you have a child who doesn't want to engage in conversation, the rest of your family is talking, and we learn through listening and that vicarious experience. So if you say, look, dinner is a no screen time, we are going to talk and enjoy each other, and you sit at that table, and even if that child isn't participating, they are listening. And I know my parents, when we would sit at dinner, you would listen to them talk about the stresses of the day or the frustrations and how they overcame it. Or you'd hear they had a horrible day, but yet here they are smiling and having a good time at dinner. So it teaches you some of those things. The other thing that I learned as a parent myself, I had a daughter she still does, but she's way better now, but she had a ton of anxiety, and anxiety was driving her life. And two things. One is that I could not make her heal herself until she was ready. And I had many conversations with her about when you get tired of the state of affairs that you're in, when you're tired of feeling like this, I'm here to help. but I can't make her. And that's so frustrating as a parent because you want to fix and we can't fix. And when we try to fix when they're not ready to be fixed, we add to their stress. And so, one thing I learned with my daughter is when she would start freaking out about something, I'm a fixer. So would right away, well, have you done this? We'll try this. We'll do this. She didn't need that. And so what I started to say to her is, do you just need to vent? You want me to listen, or do you need my help solving something? And I was amazed that I'd say 80% of the time, she just wanted to vent. And as she vented to me, and I just posed clarifying questions, not telling her what to do, but just, well, why do you think you feel like that? Or questions like that, she would solve her own problem. And she gained self-confidence about her ability to solve problems because I wasn't pushing my solution in. And I was recognizing that she could come to that. Every once in a while she'd come and be like, okay, first I just need to vent, but then I really do need your help to figure this out. But it took such pressure off me as a parent because I could say to myself, I didn't solve this problem for her, but I was a good parent today because what she needed was somebody to hear her in a safe space. So giving your children that flexibility to say, do you just want me to listen and just empathize and recognize that when the child is elevated in stress or sadness or rage, this part of their brain is, you're not talking to this part of your brain. You're talking to the limbic brain. You're not talking to the rational reasoning part. So it's not a good use of time. And all it does is ramp up that limbic system to just continue to say danger, danger, more danger, more danger. Now we're being judged. Now we're being criticized now. And it just spirals out. So as a parent, I think the hardest piece of advice that I can give is patience and space. Your children are their own people. And as much as you want to mold them the way that they're going to go eventually, and you want it to be done now to help them avoid that pain, they have to do it themselves or it never fixes. And it creates a wedge in your relationship that, again, puts a filter in. I'm never good enough. Mom's always criticizing me, blah, blah, blah. And it just becomes a cycle of negativity.
And on the other hand, if you introduce that, from my understanding, you create something different. You create, as you said, a safe space where the child doesn't, first and foremost, feel seen, understood, and loved in the first place, right? And we don't have to have always all the answers because we know that the answers are within if we allow it to unfold. And
Yep.
yes, you're right, that's not easy. And but powerful. And I think I'm a mother myself, and I would sign this immediately because I really believe it's all about relationship. It's all about being there for your child when they need it. And yet, I would like you to ponder a little bit more with regards to the use of digital devices, artificial intelligence. What is your take on it? You already mentioned, to have dinner times where there is no space for any digital device, where you actually really engage with one another, and also just stand silence, because I guess that's also, not I guess, I know it's also important, right? We don't have to always talk to one another, but we are there and we observe one another and we feel also one another. What is your advice out of your professional perspective also with regards to the use of digital devices and social media starting from an early age? How would you approach it?
I think the further you can keep your kids away from technology for the longest amount of time is better. And we research is starting to study what they call cognitive offloading. And I don't memorize phone numbers anymore because my phone has all my phone numbers. I don't have to understand a map because I have a GPS. I don't have to go to a library and skim, read, and pull main ideas because my phone will just give me the answer. These are wonderful. They're wonderful tools. However, the unintended consequence is massive, and that is that we're not using the cognitive part of our brain. And, as I mentioned before, this lower part of our brain, it's just that animal part of our brain meant to keep us alive. This is what makes us human. And if we stop using it, when do we cease to really be human anymore, right? So we've got some, and I know that's like a little hyperbolic, but we're losing our ability. I just read something the other day that said only 21% of the adults in the United States have adequate critical thinking skills. 21%. And so that's terrifying. So I think the longer you can keep your kids off of that, the better. And recognizing that the way that we learn our executive functions in anything in our brain is repetition, experience, and emotion. And so providing as many experiences and joy and those are the things that will form the executive functions. When you think about, my friend gave me this advice many years ago and for my kids, and it was really great. Instead of solving their problems, or they'd come with something, well, I don't know what to do about this, and I would reply with, well, what's your plan? And I made them think about it. And I made them, and unfortunately, currently in schools, we are still in this mode that school is the transmission of content, which is kind of outdated at this point because we can get content anywhere in any form we want. But the school model continues to be this, just, I'm transferring content, open my head, open your head, I'll pour it in. And what we really need is we need to be teaching thinking. We need to be teaching creativity. The other thing with creative thinking is you have to have a quiet mind to be creative. And this is a challenge I would give anybody listening, is take 5 minutes a day and turn everything off and just sit. Just look outside, look at the trees, watch the trees blow, watch the snow fall, stare at the grass and the wind. Just empty your mind for 5 minutes a day, and you will be amazed at how difficult it is to do this. But when you start to do it, your mind just starts floating and wandering, and you start to have thoughts. And from a structural standpoint, that is required for creative thinking. So starting to build some of those practices, there isn't really one right answer that's the bazooka of all things, like, oh, this will change everything. It's a matter of just layering your context, controlling, because remember, behavior is biology and context. So understanding the biology, but shaping a context that is positive and social and forgiving and promotes strength in your child instead of fear. And it takes lots of little efforts.
Yeah, and Lisa, this is certainly what we are doing within SBL, School Beyond Limitations, because we are not a conventional school which says you have to memorize everything,
Yeah.
although we also believe in repetition and experience and emotion, because these three aspects are interconnected. But as you rightly say, meditative, mindful moments, where I really watch out and take some time off. And this is what we really aim to do on a daily basis, because critical thinking, as you rightly said, I'm really astonished to hear only 21% in the United
Yeah.
States of adults are critical thinkers, because that's our guiding force. You mentioned before, I'm supposed as an adult, as a parent in the first place, to be there to basically enhance, within the child, finding the answers that they hold already within, right? So to encourage them and to allow them for their self-confidence also to blossom and to connect with themselves, right? So I think that's so extremely important. And I don't know what you think, and maybe that allows us to slowly come to an end. Maybe you can kind of picture the importance of what happens at home in the context, and what happens in school in the context, and what happens if and friends, in the context of friends and so forth, and how those aspects can collaborate in a way in order to help students really navigate today's reality by
Hmm.
using their minds, which is connected with their inner knowing. I'm calling it inner knowing, and it's not just this immediate reaction in the limbic system.
Right. And that's where I am a big believer that every school should be intentionally teaching kids about their brain. And I've gone in and taught kids all the way down to like fifth grade, and they're fascinated. We do the little triggers workshop with them and they talk about what stresses them out. And they're amazed at how other people, like just the recognition that everybody doesn't feel the same way I do, is kind of a mind bender for them. And then teaching them about how their brain makes perceptions, teaching them how the stress regulation system works, and the importance of that self awareness. It should be taught as not a one unit, one time. It should be built into the routine of the school. It should be infused in how we manage classrooms, how we deal with discipline, how we work with parents. It should be part of everything because we are fighting a lot of negative contextual factors in the world. And we need, especially in our homes and in our schools, we need those to be a little safe bubble where you walk through the door, you belong, and you are in an environment that is a positive, uplifting place, as opposed to one more example of where I'm not good enough, or one more example of where people don't include me, or things like that. So, and one other little nugget too that I didn't mention that parents are always really interested in when kids hit their teenage years, something goes on in their brain that like kind of a cleaning. It cleans out a bunch of stuff that they're like, okay, we made some of these connections, but you're not using them, so we'll get rid of them. It's just a housekeeping. But one of the byproducts of that is that kids lose the ability to read facial expressions. So when kids are in their teenage years, they go from a wider range of emotional intelligence to a narrower one in regard to nonverbal communication. So when you think of yourself as a parent of a teenager, how often is your face concerned? Or how often is your face worried? Your child will read, you are happy, surprised, or mad. And so, one thing I tell parents is name your face. Tell your child, I am not mad at you. I'm just really worried. So, can we have a conversation? It diffuses the situation because if your brain registers, this person's mad at me, that limbic system is going to activate for a fight or a flight.
Thank you for this very, very important example because I think it's really visual and it makes people, everyone who listens to this, reflect a lot. I wanted you to also share before we come to an end the books that you wrote and the
Sure.
titles and maybe just a little glimpse of the content of those books. Maybe there is somebody out there who would like to read your books.
Okay, sure. So the first book's called Neuro, and it is basically the first part of the book talks about all these contextual factors. It talks about, social media, organized sports, parenting styles, medicine, the medical field, and how we are kind of really attracted to being sick and having a pill fix us, right? So it talks about all these contextual factors that influence the development of those filters in our brain. Then it talks about the brain science and goes into a little bit more depth of how the brain, the body, and the mind are all connected, how the systems are connected. And you don't have to be a scientist to understand it. It's in very layman's terms. The third section is really about school and things schools can do to help students learn about their brain. So these are things that you could do at home as well if you're a parent and not a school. Talks about how to set up a NeuroWell culture that's safe, supportive, and proactive. And then the last section of the book is about how parents can implement positive contextual factors in their home. So that's kind of the first book is this idea of if we reshape our context, we have control over the context we create. We can't deal with the wider world. We can recognize it's there. But if we control our context, we can help make ourselves and our children happier, healthier, and more successful. And then the second book is a leadership book. A lot of school leaders have lots of aspirational and inspirational goals, but they don't know how to operationalize them. So it's called Aspirations to Operations, and it goes through 8 C's in a framework that help you move from an idea to there's some planning C's like clarity, coherence, cadence, and shaping what your initiative is. There's some engagement C's that are coaching and collaboration, how to establish purposeful collaboration and coaching. And then there's sustainability C's. And this is the work that's communication and celebration. And it grew out of the work I've been doing in school transformation for 15 years. So everything in that book are techniques and actions that I've done with organizations that have worked successfully. And we just kind of iterated them until they were really powerful. And then I've put them all together.
Lisa, very inspiring. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure that there will be people out there who will further read your books, your articles. And I'm sure that there are also articles out there that can be downloaded from your work, about your work. And are you also on YouTube with your work? Do you have podcasts?
I do not have anything on YouTube right now.
Okay.
I've been on lots of podcasts, and so if people want to hear more about what I'm doing, they can get that right through my webpage. There, I have links to them, and I'll link this one as well, so people can access it and link to your YouTube.
Thank you, Lisa, for your insights. They were very powerful, and we wish you well with your future and with all your next steps that you are undertaking. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank
being
you
with
for
us.
having me. Yep.
Thank you. At School Beyond Limitations, we support our students find their unique essence. Feel free to share the content of this podcast with other parents. We are here to show that your children can, indeed, bring their unique essence into life. So, reach out to us if you think that this is what you'd like your daughter, your son to experience, or apply through our website. Also, leave your comments, your questions, or your review about the podcast. Share it with others. And as you know, sharing is caring.